On this Tuesday night, drowning in debt.
I don't earn much and everything's high.
Canadians' credit card debt climbs to levels not seen in nearly 2 decades. We'll tell you who's struggling the most. Water warning, why Calgary is calling on residents to cut back again. Finally free, an Israeli hostage rescued after 10 months in captivity. And break out the champagne supernova. Oasis fans no longer look back in anger as the Gallagher brothers get the band back together.
Global National with Donna Friesen. Reporting tonight, Jeff Semple.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. We begin tonight with an alarming new snapshot of the cost of living crisis. A growing number of Canadians are turning to credit cards to get by. Equifax Canada says credit card debt has climbed by 13.7% compared with this time last year. The average credit card balance is now more than $4,300. That's the highest level in 17 years. The growing debt load is being felt right across the country, but as Eric Sorensen explains, young people in their 20s and 30s are having the toughest time paying the bills.
Younger adults who've only really known rising costs are discovering the hard way what happens when you can't make credit card payments each month, especially, say these students, for those who don't have jobs.
If you don't work, you can't necessarily pay back the interest fees and things like that. So you have to be careful because it's really easy to be in debt.
Hard time paying for anything at this point.
Yeah. Because?
I don't earn much and everything's high.
That's the big problem for young adults. They have bills to pay, but they earn less, then fall into debt.
The incomes tend to be lower. There tends to be less savings. And therefore, when cost of living is higher, it's, there's less buffer. So that instantly creates some challenges and more likelihood to kind of maybe end up missing payments on credit commitments and things.
Overall, consumer debt rose in the second quarter to $2.5 trillion, up 4.2%. For adults aged 26 to 35, the rate of missed credit card payments is now almost 2%, an increase of more than 21% over a year ago. When you miss monthly payments, it doesn't take long for debt, like a house of credit cards, to collapse household budgets.
I think a lot of my friends are struggling, that's for sure.
I just avoid using my credit card as much as possible because it is easy to just get into debt with that.
The average Canadian has more than $4,000 owing on their credit card. A vicious cycle of not paying it off can start very early.
Less people are paying in full. More people are making the minimum payment. And if you look at credit cards and making the minimum payment, it'll take a very long time to pay off.
I feel really anxious about getting my credit card.
Taihan Mobashir is getting his first credit card tomorrow and sees the pitfalls.
I'm already in somewhere on 10 grand of debt just for my first semester or first year.
And now you're getting a credit card.
Yeah. More debt.
Taihan is preparing, like many young people, for the future. A future with more debt. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
An urgent plea today from Calgary's mayor as the city begins another round of water restrictions. Jyoti Gondek warns Calgarians need to reduce consumption now or face a water crisis.
Let me be very clear. If we do not stick to water reductions, we will run out of water. That's a fact. We do not have the amount of water that we need for regular usage flowing through our system right now.
And Heather Yourex-West joins us now from Calgary with more. Heather, it's been a long summer for Calgarians. What should people know?
Yeah, it certainly has been a summer full of brown grass and lost gardens, weeks without access to swimming pools and splash parks. And now the people of Calgary and the surrounding areas are being asked to do it all over again. Now, this, of course, started back in June when we had that rupture of the city's primary water main. It required extensive repairs that took a lot longer than everyone anticipated. Now, people during that time could not use water outside for any reason. We were asked to take shorter showers, do less laundry. And really, those restrictions only began to ease at the end of July. Then in August, the city had more bad news. This troubled pipe requires more work. That repair needs to be done before the cold weather sets in. That work has now begun, but this time around, the city people here aren't just not reducing as much as we need to. On the first day, 80 million liters of water over the target was used, and the city's mayor says that at that rate, we are going to be in trouble very quickly.
If we run out of water, that means you will turn on your tap and nothing will come out. It will mean that firefighters cannot attend to emergencies without wondering whether the hydrant will turn on. We will be in dire straits if we do not start reducing our water usage now.
And Jeff, these water restrictions are expected to be in place through to the end of September, which is still a time of year that is pretty hot and, of course, takes us through the back to school period. Jeff?
All right. Heather Yourex-West in Calgary. Thanks, Heather. The Israeli military says it has rescued one of the hostages captured by Hamas on October the 7th. These are believed to be the first images of 52-year-old Qaid Farhan al-Qadi, taken shortly after he was rescued. Israel says commandos pulled him from an underground tunnel in southern Gaza. He was taken to hospital and is in stable condition. Hamas took more than 200 Israeli hostages during its assault, and al-Qadi is only the 8th to be rescued so far. He's also the first to be found inside Hamas's vast network of tunnels inside Gaza. Mike Armstrong has more on his emotional homecoming.
This was an Israeli military helicopter carrying a freed hostage home, landing in the courtyard of a hospital in southern Israel. The man's family had been told he was returning and literally sprinted to see him. Qaid Farhan al-Qadi is a Muslim nomadic Bedouin. He was captured by Hamas October 7th while working as a security guard at a kibbutz about 4.5 kilometers east of Gaza. One of al-Qaidi's first calls was from the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, but from there it was all about family. A father of 11, according to reports, while he was in captivity, a new grandson was born. This family member says al-Qaidi has lost weight, but that after spending 10 months in a tunnel, it was like he returned from the dead.
He appears to be in general good condition.
According to Israeli officials, 104 hostages taken October 7th are still in Gaza. The IDF believes 34 have been killed, but that number could be higher. Only 8 hostages have been rescued alive by the Israeli military. A rescue operation in June freed 4 hostages, but led to a series of firefights that left, according to the Hamas-run health ministry, more than 200 people dead. Al-Qaidi is the first to have been found inside Hamas's tunnel network. There was no resistance. His captors may have fled.
Israeli commandos rescued Qaid Farhan al-Qadi from an underground tunnel, following accurate intelligence.
Now, Israeli forces continue strikes on targets in Gaza. According to civil defense, at least 10 people were killed Tuesday. Calls for a ceasefire are again getting louder. Both the Israeli opposition and the hostages' families forum say a negotiated deal is the only way forward. The rest of the hostages won't be freed, they say, one at a time. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Washington.
Ukraine says it has captured more territory inside Russia, claiming to now control 100 settlements in the Kursk region. Ukrainian troops are now just 25 kilometers from the Kursk nuclear power plant. The head of the UN's nuclear watchdog warns that its reactors are especially vulnerable, with no protective dome to shield them from missiles, drones, or artillery fire. And tonight, President Volodymyr Zelensky revealed his military has tested its first made-in-Ukraine ballistic missile. As Redmond Shannon reports, the long-range weapons could strike deep inside Russian territory.
Tatiana looks at what's left of her house after a second straight night of Russian air attacks on Ukraine. She says her neighbor was burned alive by a drone bomb. Months of strikes have been dismantling Ukraine's power system.
It will be incredibly hard to maintain the situation till winter, and when it will be cold outside, I honestly don't know how we are going to handle it. It will be really tough.
This Ukrainian MP told Global News she believes Ukraine must be allowed to use US and NATO missiles to hit launch sites inside Russia, rather than wait for them to reach Ukraine's airspace and try to shoot them down using its newly acquired F-16 jets.
In this huge attack of Russians, we destroyed already some missiles and drones using F-16.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky claimed Tuesday that Ukraine has now tested its first domestically made ballistic missile, which wouldn't require any permission to use. In the meantime, Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov warned Washington against allowing its bombs to be used on Russian soil, saying any world war wouldn't be confined to Europe.
If they cannot protect their own territory, how they can threaten the world with a third world war?
Their own territory being Russia's Kursk region, where Ukraine says it has made more small gains, offsetting some of the recent losses in the Donbas region. In Russian-controlled Kursk, the UN's nuclear chief visited the local nuclear power plant as Ukrainian troops got within 25 kilometres of it.
If there was the case of an impact or something that could affect there would be serious consequences. Under no circumstances a nuclear power plant should be attacked, that a nuclear power plant should never be militarized.
On Tuesday, Volodymyr Zelensky also said he will soon present a plan to US President Joe Biden to end the war. He says he will also discuss it with both presidential candidates, Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump. Jeff?
Redmond Shannon in London. Thanks, Red. Former U.S. President Donald Trump is facing a new federal indictment related to his push to overturn the 2020 presidential election result. The revised indictment lays out the same 4 charges brought against Trump last year, but this time focuses instead on his role as a political candidate seeking re-election. U.S. prosecutors narrowed their approach after the U.S. Supreme Court ruling that former presidents have broad immunity from criminal prosecution. The new indictment, filed by special counsel Jack Smith, dropped allegations that Trump attempted to pressure the U.S. Justice Department in his effort to overturn the result. The activist who took over a referendum campaign calling for an independent 6th state says police have warned him that his life is in danger. Inderjeet Singh Gosal, a pro-Khalistan activist in Brampton, Ontario, took over from Hardeep Singh Nijjar after he was shot and killed in the parking lot of his Sikh temple in Surrey, BC last year. Before the shooting, Nijjar had also been warned by police about his safety. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau later claimed the government of India had ordered Nijjar's assassination, which New Delhi denies. In an interview with Global News, Gosal said he believed he was safe in a beautiful country like Canada, but clearly India is not letting up. And in India, police fired water cannons and tear gas at demonstrators angry over the rape and murder of a trainee doctor. The attack in Kolkata earlier this month triggered mass protests calling for justice and better protections for women. Many doctors are refusing to see non-emergency patients until their demands are met. It's the eve of the Paris Paralympics. Coming up, meet the athletes proudly representing Canada at the opening ceremony.
Who are we? Teamsters! What are we going to do? Fight!
Protesters were out in force in Halifax today following that recent labour dispute involving Canada's 2 major railways. Members of the Teamsters Union gathered outside a hotel as Prime Minister Justin Trudeau spoke inside at a fundraiser. The union says it wants to send a message directly to Trudeau that its members have been stripped of their rights after being forced back to work. The dispute included calls for better working conditions, wages and benefits. Those demonstrations came as Trudeau's Liberals wrapped up their final day of the annual cabinet retreat. Ministers have been meeting in Halifax since Sunday, talking trade, immigration, and Canada-US relations. The retreat wrapped up just as new polling showed the Liberals lagging far behind the Conservatives. As Mackenzie Gray reports, today's focus was on the policy changes needed to get the government back on track.
The Liberals are saying all the right things.
Voters in Oakville, Ontario are favorable about our investments in healthcare and the green economy writ large.
But Toronto area voters have disagreed, with the Conservatives winning a by-election in June, stealing a seat the Liberals held for more than 30 years, a political warning shot mirroring the Conservatives' dominance in national polling numbers.
What is the change that Canadians are looking for?
A good question. One of the government House leader says she's not sure about, still listening on what their key legislative priorities will be.
It's, about us talking about the things that we're doing and talking about them in a way that is meaningful for Canadians and that connects with them.
The one major change the Liberals have announced, reducing temporary foreign workers and hinting permanent resident numbers will also be slashed, in part to assuage housing concerns.
Our population has increased by 3 million people in the last 3.5 years. That's more than the entire decade of the 1990s. But we've built 900,000 fewer homes than we did in the 1990s.
Economist Mike Moffat supporting the immigration limits after he and 18 other experts spoke with Cabinet over the past 3 days about the economy and Canada-U.S. relations.
I don't think we have any reason to be concerned.
Canada's ambassador in Washington believes she can work with whichever administration takes over, even if it's Donald Trump, who's proposed a 10% tariff on all imports.
I think that candidate Trump has some thoughts on global tariffs, which could be complicated for Canada, but I also think that the application of those to Canada will be very difficult for the United States.
Other tariffs look more imminent. Beijing now threatening retaliation for Canada slapping a 100% tariff on Chinese-made electric vehicles and a 25% charge on Chinese aluminum and steel.
Let's remember what this is about. It is about protecting a Canadian industry and Canadian workers.
The Prime Minister's next challenge, meeting with his caucus, a considerably less cohesive group compared to Cabinet Jeff, and there'll be questions from backbench Liberal MPs on why Justin Trudeau should lead the party into the next election.
All right, Mackenzie Gray in Halifax. Thanks, Mac. Whooping cough warnings still ahead. The latest Canadian city to report a sharp spike in cases. Whooping cough cases are climbing across Canada. New Brunswick has declared an outbreak. Quebec has reported a surge. And today, Toronto's public health agency said it's also seeing a spike. Canada's largest city is reporting 99 cases of whooping cough so far this year. That's a sharp rise, more than double the pre-pandemic average of 38 cases. Nearly half of those are among children aged 10 to 14. Shalima Maharaj reports.
What tends to happen is when there's an increase in infectious disease somewhere else, it usually comes here too.
And according to Toronto Public Health, the number of whooping cough cases is now more than double the pre-pandemic average.
During the pandemic, we had a decline in cases because we were masking and social distancing and not interacting in the way that we usually do.
Also known as pertussis, whooping cough is a cyclical disease that peaks every 2 to 6 years. And it's typically the little ones that are most at risk for severe outcomes.
And infants can get very, very sick if they get whooping cough. They can be hospitalized and have a lot of complications and even die from the disease.
And vaccines are routinely given for this particular infection at 2 months, 4 months, 6 months, 18 months, and then before school.
And those who are pregnant are encouraged to get the vaccine in their 3rd trimester.
Its nickname is the 100-day cough. It can cause a very prolonged coughing syndrome. It's more pronounced in the youngest.
Cases have also surged in Quebec, with 11,671 reported to date, eclipsing its last peak in 2019. And New Brunswick declared a whooping cough outbreak across the province.
We have had a decline in some of our routine vaccines that we get as children. So we're now putting extra effort to ensure the community is aware.
And as a reminder, as kids head back to class, to make sure they're up to date on their immunizations. Shalima Maharaj, Global News, Toronto.
Buried treasures. Up next, what a storm uncovered on a Nova Scotia beach.
Today is gonna be the day that they're gonna throw it back to you.
Today is going to be the day that Oasis, one of the best-selling bands in British history, is getting back together, announcing a long-awaited tour in the UK and Ireland next summer. No dates have been announced yet outside of the British Isles. The reunion ends a 15-year feud between brothers Liam and Noel Gallagher, the two publicly traded insults while building successful solo careers. That's assuming they don't break up again before the tour starts. It's not unusual to find pieces of old sailing vessels washed up along Canada's east coast. But on one Nova Scotia beach, 3-century-old wooden ships were recently uncovered. Heidi Petracek explains their rich history and how they were discovered.
You could be forgiven for thinking this was simply a picturesque Nova Scotia beach, because to get the full story on what lies here, you'd have to know 88-year-old Wilfred Ogilvie.
Most people thought that was the wharf, but they didn't know there was 3 old ships buried in the sand.
But rushing water from flash flooding this summer exposed the hull of one of those ships, the Hamburg. Somerville is next to the Avon River, which flows from the Minas Basin, part of the Bay of Fundy, which means the tide comes and goes at this beach at the end of Block Wharf Road.
This whole bay will fill up to 44 feet of water.
Which is how evidence of the region's rich shipbuilding heritage was buried over time.
That is part of one of the pins that held the planks on these ships. Those were all probably handmade.
More than a century ago, the wooden vessels hauled local gypsum and lumber overseas. But once the steam engine came along, the ships were permanently parked.
And for years, they sat there and probably sunk pretty well every day. And then the gravel started building in around them.
The tide is coming in now, and the tide is such here that within 6 hours, all this will be underwater, including the ships buried below. So visiting the Hamburg's remains has to be timed just right.
Oh, I was amazed. I was absolutely amazed.
Local photographer Irvin Leopold documents local history and didn't know about the ships at Somerville until the Hamburg came to light.
This is, this is a museum sitting right here. You can walk back 100 years of time right here. That's pretty amazing to do that.
Now that Somerville's secret is out, he hopes people will come see the ship for themselves, a piece of our past brought into our present. Heidi Petracek, Global News, Somerville, Nova Scotia.
And that is Global National for this Tuesday night. I'm Jeff Semple. With the Paralympics set to start in Paris tomorrow, tonight's Your Canada is Team Canada's flag bearers for the opening ceremony. It is the 6th and final games for Patrick Anderson. He's widely considered one of the greatest wheelchair basketball players of all time, with 3 golds and 1 silver medal. Anderson will be joined by Katarina Roxon with a gold medal and bronze medals. The 31-year-old will be the first Canadian female swimmer to compete in 5 Paralympics. Good luck to them, and thank you for watching. Hope to see you back here again tomorrow. Have a great night.